We're gonna get started. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. It was a really wonderful day yesterday. I just wanted to say briefly a thank you to everyone for your participation and to the speakers for helping remind me of the importance of advocacy. I think I was really thinking last night about when I started being a nurse 20 years ago, and I remember in nursing school, I went to McMaster in Hamilton, and I still have my textbook from there. It's a poverty and homelessness course I took in school. And in that textbook, there's actually an article by Jack Layton about homelessness. And at that time, we had a politician who was really passionate and spoke really eloquently about this issue. And in some ways, it made me really sad to think about, we don't have a lot of politicians like that anymore. But I think hearing, Maggie speak late yesterday afternoon about the importance of advocacy and what a couple of people can do together and to change things was really inspiring and helpful to think. I think the last few years as a nurse, it's been so much about, just trying to literally keep people alive, trying to literally working 3 or 4 jobs because there's not enough nurses. And so that thing of being reminded of why I started doing this work and why we're still doing this work together was really powerful to me. And just if there for any nurses in the group, and I think I would recommend it to anyone, but to look at Kathy Crow and she retired from being a nurse this year, and I cried thinking about that because she's one of my nursing heroes, absolutely, but she is not done fighting. She's still very much working in Toronto doing this amazing work, but she still has that the fight in her, she hasn't lost the love, and she hasn't lost the drive, and she hasn't lost the rage. And I admire that so much, because I think sometimes I was thinking in a sad way last night about those times where I've talked with clients and said, when I've been in a burnt out place and been well, I'm sorry, I don't have a blanket for you. And those horrible soul killing moments of I can't even give you very basic life things. And that sometimes I resign myself to that. And so it was a good reminder of needing to keep the rage in me, the fire in me, not the unhealthy rage, but I think the fire. So so thank you for that. And then I also just wanted to say thank you to the KT6 team for their bravery, because I think really challenging us professionals to be humble in the work that we do and to really think critically about how we're including peers and people with lived experience in our work, when we're using them alongside us when they're helping us do our clinical work, but then also in our research work, in our program development. I think we still have a lot to learn about how to do that well. And so I really appreciate their bravery. So we've got a very exciting panel of people to start the day with good energy. So I'm gonna first introduce a good friend of mine, Bobby Jamison. So yeah, woo.
Thanks, Mom.
So Bobby's a residential school and long-term street survivor and drug use who has reversed over 20 overdoses and trained numerous people dozens, hundreds of people in naloxone. Today, he is living in recovery and is a practicing Buddhist. He is a founding member of Overdose Prevention Ottawa, which opened Ottawa's first overdose prevention site in 2017 and was featured in the documentary Blue Roses that examines providing palliative care in rooming houses. Bobby received the Rathi Balian Award in 2017, recognizing his many years of volunteer work with the Nessie program at Somerset West Community Health Centre, and the Transformative Change Award on behalf of Overdose Prevention Ottawa by the Alliance for Healthier Communities in 2018. So welcome, Bobby.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm a little bit nervous. Doing presentations is not something I'm well versed at, so I'll do my best today. Thanks very much for that. It's so good when I feel so good to see the friendly faces, people I know. So to see Kim, it really helps me a lot. I usually open with the land acknowledgement. So I did this really long one with a lot of really great words, because that's what I've been doing all week, is trying to prepare for this. And then I thought, when I arrived here today, I'd like to just do it the way we do it at Soul Space. So what we do and what we talk about at Soul Space is, we seem to forget what people tell us, whether it's good or bad, but we never forget how somebody made us feel. So when we got talking about land acknowledgement, we thought about it's better to feel the land acknowledgement than just to use these words. And so if you'd maybe bear with me for a minute, I'd like to try it here. And I'd like to just everybody get comfortable in your chair. Take a deep breath with me. And I want you to think about the last time you were in nature. Hopefully it wasn't that long ago. And just try to take yourself back to that time, that place. And in that breath, see if you can feel maybe the birds, the sun setting, there's a breeze on your face. Take yourself to that time, that place, and really feel that. And while we're there, we're going to remember the folks that looked after this land long before we can remember, who cared for this land, who has a sacred connection with this land, who shares that sacred connection with us. So in that breath, we have gratitude and we're humbled. I also want to bring my awareness to this room, the space, U of Ottawa, and the time that I'm going to be able to share with all you folks. So with that, just take your time, bring your awareness back to the room, and thanks for sharing that feeling with me. Thank you. Well, I guess good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation, where I'll be speaking about wellness and opposing burnout. In the field of harm reduction, I would first like to say I'm excited to do this presentation from the perspective of a person with lived experience. The term street psychiatry really appealed to me. Whenever I hear new terms being used to providing low barrier mental health access to vulnerable folks, I get a real feeling of hope. So thank you for that. I would also like to thank Sarah and Amber for their patience in supporting me to be here today. I'm not real computer literate, so they were very patient with me. In this presentation, I'll be sharing some of the challenges and rewards of providing this compassionate support to my peers, as well as discussing the important topics of wellness and burnout in this field. So I guess without further ado, let's dive in. I got a lot of stuff here, so I'll try to go through it pretty quick. We all can say we have lived experience. So for me, lived experience means growing up on the streets. Today, I'll be sharing some of my personal journey in providing that support to other folks like me. So I ask, who's like me? I was an orphan, a reform school survivor. The school I attended was called St. Joseph's in a place called Elford, Ontario, not far from here. Just before my arrival in 1971, the school transitioned from a residential school to a reform school. I think they called them training school at the time. After escaping the care of the brothers, I grew up pretty much on the streets, mostly Ottawa, but across Canada. I lived on the downtown east side of Vancouver for quite a while. I guess the reason I'm telling you this is just to demonstrate how deeply street involved I was when my healing journey began. You know, I wasn't an easy case. I can remember one time sitting in a detox in Toronto. It was a long time ago. This wise, elderly cleaning lady, she looked over at me sitting there and she said, you know, she says, I know what's wrong with you. I said, what? She said, your spoon is full, but your heart is empty. It took me a long time to understand what she meant by that. I was taught in treatment that wellness is something achieved through balance of mind, body, and spirit. And if I'm not mistaken, the 12th step of AA goes something like this. The step requires you to have a spiritual awakening. And that came as a result of completing all the 11 steps before that. Once you've had this awakening, our job was to share that recovery hope and practice and principles in our daily affairs. And that's the 12th step of AA. So a lot of my healing began in those types of places because that's all there was back then. So for me, supporting other people in different places in their journey seemed like the right environment. Part of my recovery was attending a peer program. This program had 3 phases. After graduation of the 3rd phase, I was feeling pretty confident. This newfound confidence was allowing me to do more and more in my community. And this pride played a big role on keeping me from the drugs of my choice. At around the same time, we were beginning to see the devastating effects of fentanyl. And I believe people like me could help. After volunteering for years at my local CHC and still picking up all these little training opportunities in that same peer program I mentioned just earlier, I was beginning to feel pretty good about my own recovery. So to start working at a CHC seemed like the perfect opportunity. Unfortunately, within 3 months, I was feeling the effects of burnout. I left on mental health leave, which at the time I called self-preservation leave. This interaction between professionals, management, and so on was hard for me. Workplace competition and bureaucracy didn't seem to be my strong points. Not to mention the deaths and unbelievable suffering I was witnessing. I began to feel overwhelmed. I felt like I was working within the very system in which I felt played a role in my decline, along with other friends and family members. This feeling I was experiencing is difficult to describe. I can say it felt like morally I was doing something wrong. So for me, this was confusing. A moral injury? Maybe, I don't know. I was so fortunate to be exposed to some amazing professionals who believed in building and strengthening us peers so that we could navigate some of these obstacles. When professionals and peers can work in tandem, I have witnessed some amazing life-saving acts. You may have already guessed I'm passionate about peer engagement. Nothing about us without us. I could speak all day about the benefits of peer engagement, and I know this Street Psychiatry Conference understands that because here I am doing the presentation, right? So feels good. Thanks. Peers may be able to offer unique perspectives, advice, and coping strategies that are tailored to their shared experiences and may be more relatable and accessible than traditional mental health professionals. It can be especially important for individuals who feel isolated or marginalized. When individuals see others who have successfully overcome similar challenges, it can provide inspiration and motivation to continue their own recovery journey. Peer support can also complement traditional mental health services and may improve engagement and adherence to treatment. Wellness is healing together. Through hiring and supporting us peers, this can be a huge undertaking. I say this with a grin. Peer support and peer engagement, in my opinion, is how we will recover from this crisis. I believe if we had a well thought out infrastructure of collective care and grassroots organizations collaboratively working together, I truly believe this huge undertaking of supporting us peers is doable. Sadly, the peer program that gave me my start was dismantled to make room for a safe injection site. It's important for peer support to be balanced with other forms of support and to be integrated within the broader system of care. That includes mental health professionals and evidence-based treatments. As a person who's experienced our system with all its faults and successes, I still believe that government-funded organizations will always struggle providing the extra support I felt I needed at the time and still do. One support that really stands out for myself in my personal recovery journey is spiritual support. The importance of spiritual support in organizations that employ peers and work with vulnerable people cannot be overstated. Also, I'd like to add peer support workers who may be working in challenging and emotionally demanding roles where they face extreme suffering, loss, and death. Spiritual support can be a source of strength and resilience. By tapping into our spiritual beliefs and practices, we can find an inner resource that we need to provide compassionate and effective support to our friends and clients while also maintaining our own well-being and balance. And with that balance comes the awareness to know when to step back and to care for our own souls. From a client perspective, I benefited from the experiences of workers that were in balance. I felt that. After a couple of years speaking to people in various stages of burnout, I have learned the word wellness can mean different things to different people. And from a person with lived experience, my view can have a unique and personal definition. So please keep an open mind. For me, a lot of what I talk about comes from what I learned in treatment. Something that I learned early on in treatment was that at its core, wellness is about achieving a state of physical, spiritual, and emotional balance. However, for individuals with lived experience or mental illness or challenges, other challenges, wellness can also mean finding just ways to manage our symptoms, cope with stress, or cultivate a sense of purpose and a meaning in life. The term spiritual can be challenging to use. Many people today view spirituality as a private matter that is separate from organized religion or even as an alternative to it. One challenge of using the term spiritual is that it can mean different things to different people. Some may view spirituality as a connection to a higher power, while others may see it as a sense of purpose and meaning in their lives. Some may associate spirituality with specific practices such as meditation and prayer, while others may view it as a more general sense of awe and wonder at the natural world. Another challenge that the term spiritual can carry negative connotations for some people who have had negative experiences with organized religion. They may view spirituality as dogmatic, judgmental, or exclusive, and even abusive. These folks may be resistant to exploring spiritual practices or concepts. Growing up in the care of the brothers caused me many years of feeling blocked from any spiritual practice because of my association to organized religion. So when learning that a spiritual awakening was needed to get sober, you can imagine my demise. It is important to be sensitive to these different perspectives and to find ways to speak about spirituality that are inclusive and respectful. This may involve using language that is more accessible and less loaded, such as inner growth, personal transformation, self-discovery. It may also involve emphasizing the commonalities between different spiritual practices and beliefs, rather than focusing on the differences. Organizations know they need to support their staff holistically, but I understand that they have limited time and resources. So this is my own part I put in. Soul care can be difficult to quantify in today's materialistic world. I'm pretty sure it'd be pretty tough to acquire funding, you know? Just saying. Either way, nurturing my soul has become a priority these days. We peers need a wide range of support. This is where grassroots and collective care can play a role. I believe what's needed to continue to support and train my fellow peers as we continue along our own personal journeys of recovery. One of these grassroots organizations that I want to introduce and that I'm an active part of this organization is called Soul Space. So if I can, I'd just like to introduce a bit about Soul Space, what it is. Soul Space to me is one of hopefully many more grassroots organizations that has responded to the spiritual needs of my fellow caregivers. Soul Space is a community initiative, and their initiative is to support the spirits of frontline street health, harm reduction, and social service workers. Our goals to offer low barrier cafes and play and wellness workshops, day and weekend retreats. I think we've had 150 people up to our retreats now, and they're wonderful. So a lot of supports in those areas. Another thing that we aim to support is, possibly reducing burnout, staff turnover, addressing grief, loss, and trauma through a collective approach. And this is what's interesting about some of the stuff we're doing at Soul Space, this collective care versus self-care. We're learning a lot in these areas, and I'm really excited about it. Bringing communities to share the load, the grief, and the care. Bridging these communities so that we can all work together, because it is a big load these days. Creating opportunities for social connection. Addressing barriers to self-care, nature wellness practices. For me, just getting to some of these places were difficult. So at Soul Space, we help people with the resources to get to these things. For me, a lot of lack of familiarity with self-care practices. So I learn a lot of things at these programs that teach me, some of the different practices. And there's a list that I have here. I won't go further on with it, but this is just some of what one of these organizations are doing to support us. And I want to really encourage more grassroots, more involvement, and bridging communities together. So I think today, that's all I have. I'm looking forward to some questions. I want to thank everybody for being here and for engaging in this important conversation about wellness and burnout in the harm reduction community. As we know, this past few years, they've been unprecedented. And it's essential that we prioritize our own well-being and take steps to prevent burnout. Thank you again for your time, attention, and let's continue to support each other in our shared mission to create a healthier, safer, and more just world. Thank you for your time today. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobby. So I'm really pleased to introduce Tracey Gaydosh from Frontline Baddies. We have some people from the West Coast. Woohoo! And Tracey's really fun. Tracey is a supervisor of a harm reduction group home in Calgary, Alberta, with Enviro's Wilderness School Association. Over the last year, she has been changing the youth justice system by trying to expand and educate on reconnecting youth with their communities through the only open custody program in Alberta. She was named Community Member of the Year by the Youth Advocates Office for her dedication to youth being heard through their injustices of being institutionalized. She is driven by her care and love of her community, as well as her lived experience. Tracey is a registered psychosocial rehabilitator and is currently studying to become a registered motivational interviewing wraparound facilitator and coach. She has experience as a youth counselor and detox worker in the downtown east side of Vancouver, where she met her co-founder Eileen through working at the same nonprofit. So welcome. You can just turn on your mic.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, cool. I'm told I'm not allowed to yell anymore. So. Is the PowerPoint? In the meantime, hi, I'm Tracey, as they figure this stuff out. I have trauma brain, so I will be reading from my script because if I don't, I won't remember what I need to tell you. And I have a lot of things that I want to tell you. So there's that. Also, like, thank you for everything that you have done and for being like a steward in this line of work, because we need our elders and we need like, yeah, we do, like in a very real way. So yeah, it's really appreciated. I'm not going to cry. Maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Feeling emotional today.
If you read, it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. How many of us are frontline workers in the room right now? I see you. I see you. How many of us love what we do? How many of us want to get paid for more? Yeah. Yeah. Fair. How many of us want more mental health benefits? Any. Ah, that's a rough one. If you're a relief, you don't tend to get them, hey?
I think just go. Just read it. They're coming?
It's coming.
Okay.
There's still hope.
Right? There we go. Slowly but surely. I think that's just like what Frontline is in general. Slowly but surely, we'll get through. So I'm a co-founder of Frontline Baddies. Eileen, who is sitting up at front here, is my other co-founder. And there we go. Ouch. I want to acknowledge that we operate off of the north of Turtle Island. We strive for decolonization, land back, and acknowledgement of the continued colonization through the Canadian and American governments. We're a group of humans that are Indigenous, refugee, immigrant, and settlers to Turtle Island. We acknowledge our ancestors' plights for us to be here, and we acknowledge our siblings' trauma in this line of work. We did not choose it, it chose us. So if anything in this statement hit you, you're a frontline baddie, welcome. To introduce myself, Tracey, this is the only way I know how, and this is how I was taught. Tracey was a combination of both my parents' names, meaning courageous and brave. Beatrice was my great-grandma's name, meaning blessed traveler. In the early 1900s, she worked jobs that only men would historically work and ran her own businesses. I'm proud to hold her name. Gaydosh comes from my Czech grandfather who moved to Alberta with his family during World War II. The immigration refugee worker changed our name because it was too hard to pronounce. It was Gayjosova, meaning good person. That's what my family was known for, being good people. My names hold a lot of meaning and I believe in living up to each of them. My pronouns are she and they. I'm a mixed baby from many nations and geographic locations. I have an education that was difficult and expensive to get. And I have mental health diagnoses that were just as difficult to get. And if we're honest, almost as expensive because I'm American. I carry multiple job titles and I'm proud of each. I need to highlight Enviros Wilderness School Association in Calgary, Alberta as a nonprofit supporting youth and families across the lifespan of FASD, addiction, CFS, and justice-involved youth. They have been the best nonprofit I've worked for, and I'm endlessly grateful for the opportunities and support they give me in my current role, as well as their support of Frontline Baddies, because we actively call out poor behaviors of how we're treated. And many, many nonprofits don't want to be a part of that. Our agenda for the day, because I have like 13 minutes left to talk. I apologize in advance. I'm a passionate human with fire living me. And so like sometimes I might get a little fiery. We're going to discuss the causes of burnout on frontline, what it means to be a frontline worker with lived experience, and lastly, the stigma and discrimination we encounter in this line of work. For all of us who are frontline workers in here, I need to let you know I'm going to talk about overdoses. So if that hits a bit too close to home, I completely understand like having to take a minute. Okay. Harvard Business School conducted a study where they found the category on the left to be the reasons for burnout. It's important to note the study was not conducted on frontline workers. Frontline workers have the combined causes of burnout that Harvard studied, plus the columns on the right. We're going to break some of these down further. What I truly want to highlight on this slide is that for frontline workers, our work can cause such psychological trauma and stress that we have to take leaves of absences for reasons on the right. I want to focus on the causes of burnout that directly relate to frontline workers. Many of us in this room understand what the items are on the right on an intimate and, if we're honest, visceral level. For those who don't know, though, I'm going to quickly go through them. Vicarious trauma is trauma for others have told or what you've witnessed, even though it didn't occur to you. Compassion fatigue is not having the capacity to care anymore when normally a person would. For frontline workers, this causes distress, specifically around if they're mean or evil for not being able to care in the same way they did before. Critical incident stress is the amount or intensity of criticals one is encountering. Grief and loss of clients is when a client dies or leaves before service ends, or even disappears without further information. I'm sorry, that's hitting a little bit close because one of my kids just died a few hours ago. Hopelessness due to systems failures. These systems include, but are not limited to, education, mental health, medical, children, family services, provincial government, local, federal laws that further damage community justice systems. The last, but certainly not the least, financial distress. None of us get paid enough for the work we do. Having multiple jobs to offset the pay in the same field is a norm. Stress of lack of funds, stress of not being able to pay rent, and knowing what occurs when that happens because we see it every day at work. I think it's safe to say as a collective unit, we're a bit burned out. I want to dive deeper into a few of these categories, specifically critical incident stress, client deaths, and financial distress. What's our number? We deal with a lot of quantitative and qualitative data on a regular basis for our clients. I had a professor at UBC in an abnormal psych class once talk about a study done on people who clean up homicide scenes and that they have a kill number, that the majority of professionals in this line of work can't go past before they have to quit. I believe it was in the 180 range as I took this class close to 10 years ago. I can't remember. I tried looking it up and I could not find it on Google Scholars. So what stuck with me was that someone went through the trouble and effort to study the mental health of a crime scene cleaner. I think about that lecture a lot recently, especially since being promoted to a supervisor of a harm reduction, low barrier, trauma-informed stabilization program for teens. I think about my teams, both at Enviros and Frontline Baddies. I think about what their number is before they burn out, before I'm writing their leave of absence paperwork, or I'm being handed a 2-week notice, or being called that one of them has committed suicide or relapsed and overdosed. There is yet to be an average quantitative stat found for how many criticals one person can respond to in a week for this line of work. I can sit back and analyze why it hasn't been done. Criticals range from vicarious to firsthand trauma, and what is considered a critical can even range from workplace to workplace. Intensity and duration of criticals all vary as well, no matter the personal impact certain criticals will have over others. I don't do studies, but I'm knowledgeable in how they're done, and I don't see how we can limit any of these variables down to find a number. Maybe someone else in this room can. I'm looking at you, doctors. This is where we need you. As being a researcher is not my calling. I have on this slide what I've encountered to cause critical incident stress in frontline workers. It took me 2 years to figure out for myself that I can maximum handle 3 sexual assault disclosures in a week. And if any of those involves incest, trusted adults being individuals assaulting a child, or an infant assault, that number drops to 2 before I need to take the rest of my week off. Can we take a moment to appreciate this took me 2 years to figure out for myself? That's 2 years of having multiple intense sexual assault disclosures occurring in a work week before I finally realized my number. How many stories I heard from the children I serve and the horrific things done to them, how much pain and suffering the children have gone through for me to find that number, and then even the complexity of their suffering changing that number for me. How many disclosures did I field to find that number? By my estimate, it had to be over 500 sexual assault disclosures in 2 years. And even having that number feels really fucking gross. I just gotta be honest. It feels like I'm quantifying their pain to understand my limits of support for them and for myself. But that's a discussion for another time. I like to ask my frontline baddies in our workshops what their numbers are. The ones who've been around the block, they know. There's a few of you in this room. They know over a certain amount of overdoses in a week, or deaths or threats, that they have to take the rest of their week off to recalibrate. Each critical is different, each threshold threshold and capacity for each critical is different. I'm not certain we'll ever have a number like the homicide cleanup crews have. To be honest, we already carry too many numbers. 8 is the number of past clients and co-staff I had die on me last year in 2022. 6 is the number of past youth I cared for who died in 2021. My first client I had in this line of work didn't survive past 9 months after she turned 19 and aged out in BC. To be clear, these deaths occurred after they transitioned out of the places and capacities I worked for them. 2 is the number of youth I've had die this year so far. Fuck. The youth who passed this year have been favorites. I know we're not supposed to have them, but I'm human, and I do. I just don't let them know in the moment they're my favorite. I think they know, but I just don't let them know, you know? The youth who passed this year, he was a favorite, and the one who passed last night, she was a favorite too. She was feisty, very feisty. Thank you. The youth from earlier this year, his passing hit our entire community hard, a community I no longer live in due to moving to Calgary, but one that I'm still integrally a part of. I still can't accept that I will never see him on Commercial Drive again, as he tended to always run into me in community, even years after being his key worker, with a big smile on his face. Tracey, trace me, let me buy you a beer at Bonds. Client deaths are difficult because a client dying is never the same as the next due to all of those factors, which means how we respond as frontline workers will never be the same and can't be predicted. Maybe it won't affect the individual at all. Maybe it will lead to burnout. Maybe it will result in a full-blown career change. I've literally seen everything and anything in between of those responses to a client death. I just know my 2 from this year caused me to cry at unexpected times, and they sit on my heart heavy. I wish I could say numbers don't matter, but even 1 is too many, and I would do a lot to have both of them back on this plane. Add that to the financial distress, and any frontline worker is well on their way to burnout, if not completely in it. How many of you does this slide make you feel stressed just looking at it? It's okay, be honest, raise your hand, seriously. Does this stress you out seeing this? Yeah? Okay. Now, what if that stress was with you day in and day out? Well, that is what financial distress is like, seeing this slide and having no control over it. By the way, this is also called experiential learning, meaning y'all just had an experience in this presentation that impacted you. Experiential learning leads to a higher empathy and sympathy for others in similar situations. Many frontline workers feel the same of distress you feel looking at this slide. We recognize it's a choice to do what we love to do, what we feel we were meant to put on this world to do, walk alongside others in their journeys. Much like it's a choice to continue to look at the slide, this choice shouldn't have us living paycheck to paycheck though. I have yet to meet a frontline worker that gets paid appropriately for the work they do. We have specialized knowledge. Many of us have degrees and specialized diplomas. In our line of work, we have accreditation standards, best practice standards, what's considered legal versus illegal in our line of work in regard to reporting and rights of clients, etc. We keep people alive or regulated long enough for first responders to come. As per talent.com, an average paramedic in Canada gets paid $31.60 an hour. An average frontline worker gets paid $20 an hour, which is below the cost of living in most major cities of Canada right now. Let's run through this list quickly. Financial distress is caused by a frontline worker not being able to afford mental health, not being able to afford small pleasures unless they work multiple jobs, not having full benefits for eyes and dental if they have benefits at all. One of my favorites is having to pay for disability and life insurance out of every paycheck in case of dismemberment or death on a shift because it's so prevalent. So like for those of you who don't get that, we pay other frontline workers dying. We pay for our friends and our coworkers dying at work out of our paychecks through life and dismemberment insurance. That is something that almost every frontline worker pays out of their paychecks. Consistent and constant wear and tear on our personal cars, not being able to participate in RRSP or pension matching due to needing all of the money made in our paychecks for our current bills, not having any rent control or no rent increase controls such as Alberta has. Shout out to my landlord who upped my rent by $250 a month this year. No nonprofits pushing for their frontline workers to go on medical EI versus WCB or whatever form of workers' compensation you have in your province. so that their insurance does go up, but doesn't care that medical EI only covers 55% of your paycheck, while WCB or workers' comp will cover 90% of your salary as a frontline worker. Employers expecting staff to pay out of pocket for clients' expenses and being reimbursed a month later might as well be a cherry on top of a teetering paycheck to paycheck situation. The real issue is that due to the lack of pay, many frontline workers get another job in the field as a relief or a casual to support their salary. This means that on top of their 40 hours a week, they now might be working up to 80 hours a week without proper benefits and with little to no overtime pay because the work is at different sites. We now start to see where labor shortages and wage shortages equate to having less time and energy to spend in our community, less energy to vacation or to pursue further academic or soul achievements. But let's be real, it's less time to rest and recover from our shifts. As we start to break down the complexity of frontline workers and not getting paid enough, frontline workers with lived experience and living experience face a variety of different challenges. When you're a frontline worker with living experience, it means that you might not be able to access some of the services due to working at those companies. You might face stigma attached to other frontline workers knowing your personal position, a fear or a worry that personal information will be shared with other frontline workers, or your clients see you engage in these services, which violates best practice of not sharing information about your personal life. We know how other frontline workers view the clients we serve, what bias they bring to their work. We know that with frontline workers who do not have the lived experience, they tend to pity their clients, infantilize them, or even doubt their intelligence to how they had to use a service that is being provided by the city or other nonprofits. We hear it at work every day. We are behind the closed doors of the client debriefs. We know how frontline workers without lived experience view us because it's how they view our mutual clients. It creates rifts on teams as frontline workers without lived experience also tend to virtue signal to frontline workers with lived experience. Frontline workers with lived experience know deeply they have more in common with their clients than they do with the frontline workers without lived experience, further othering us in society and our lines of work and giving us more emotional labor to wade through. Our lived experience is utilized in our labor while it's not expected from our counterparts. From my personal experience, I tend to have more work and more complex work thrown in my direction because I've handled it before and was strong enough to get out of it myself. Maybe I can teach that strength to clients. Like, that's how it works. It's a dangerous line that's crossed all the time. Many frontline workers with lived experience will let it go for the betterment of the client, but it's a continued microaggression and labor expectation placed on us, not placed on other frontline staff who should have more capacity in different ways to support the same clients because they don't have that lived experience. As a frontline worker, my lived experience comes from having mental health diagnoses, being a survivor and having ancestors be survivors of colonization, being a survivor of domestic violence and encountering a lot of death in my life. My manager, Carrie Lands at Enviros, always tells me I have to bite my tongue and it's going to cause calluses, that I can't advocate for everything and everyone. I need to pick and choose my battles and I need to tend to my fire so I don't burn others. I sit in meetings with community stakeholders and partners where bipolar, PTSD, addiction, and other mental health diagnoses are looked down on, while being on medications and a self-care plan for those diagnoses myself. The irony, hey? I get to hear comments like, I could never run your program, or your clients aren't my clients, they're too much. Or my favorite, after I got secondhand high from a youth hotboxing meth and fet in her room, I'd be in the hospital right now if that was me. In that instance, I wanted to respond with, I've overdosed twice in my life, and the only time I went to the hospital was due to the overdose occurring while I was in the shower and hitting my chest on the jaw, on the side of the tub, and needing x-rays on my chest. But obviously, that's not professional. That's not tending to my fire. My manager's right. I not only have calluses on my tongue, I have unseen burns from these conversations that I have to soothe on a regular basis as to not burn out or return to my opioid addiction. See, frontline workers with lived experiences, we're not just fighting for our clients, we're fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for system changes because we have been on that side. We know intimately how the system views us. We hate our clients being viewed in this way because we've been there ourselves, much like our experiential learning from that previous slide. Our fight extends our entire careers for pushing for better care, better policies, better laws to protect our people, because our people are the ones that are dying. Our grief is not being heard, respected, or even acknowledged. What's our number? Alberta last year had 1,346 deaths from opioid-related fatalities that didn't include overdoses from alcohol or stimulants. In 2021, Alberta had 1,446 deaths. Over 2,500 people have died in Alberta in the last 2 years, yet it's still not considered a public health crisis. I've lost count of how many friends and family have died from overdoses or drug-related use. I see their faces though, and I wouldn't want to wish that pain on others. My lived experience makes me a better frontline worker, and it also causes me to be in a more vulnerable position to emotional wounds that my counterparts without lived experience will never have to face, simply because it's not their problem. And that doesn't even include personal life and how frontline workers with lived experience are treated by their friends and families. Quickly, we become the experts on how to help people out of their worst moments or days. And because they are our community, they reach out to us for that help and support. They trust us because they don't trust first responders or police. They know we will show up for them because they have shown up for us when we needed it. I've lost count how many female friends I've had to help get restraining orders, been to the hospital with, create safety plans with due to their partners beating them. In fact, it was happening so regularly, my current partner was amazed initially at how many calls I would get regarding emergencies like this from my personal friends and family. I used to think I was alone in this. I now know I'm not, due to facilitating the workshops at Frontline Baddies and bonding with other frontline workers around this particular experience. What are we trying to do at Frontline Baddies? We started as a grassroots organization, and in October and November became a registered nonprofit in Alberta and nationally in Canada. We are trying to give space and community for those of us that need it the most, to help us recover from the constant state of burning we go through either in our home life or at our work life. We're trying to be a space that heals the healers and allows for the healers to take a breath and find connection with one another. We do this through the workshops with Frontline Baddies, our dark humor Instagram page that allows Frontline Baddies from all over the world to feel connected to one another. Private groups on our website that allows for honest discourse and education on labor rights, such as what does safe work look like in this field, or what's the difference between unemployment EI versus work safe claims, how do you get work safe claims, etc. I had introduced myself earlier in this presentation. I want to reflect on the second to last bullet point here, 11 years sober from opioids. I almost lost this earlier this year due to that hotboxing situation. I knew immediately that it was an opioid-based substance being smoked because the high I was feeling. And at one point I feared I was going to overdose because it wasn't leveling out. And anyone who's a substance user knows what I'm talking about. It wasn't stopping. The situation itself wasn't what caused me to almost relapse. The response of those around me did. When we talk about financial distress, my sobriety is too high of a charge for this field to take from me, but it almost did. If it wasn't for the community I built and my friends and therapists supporting me, I wouldn't be presenting today. We're being burned. The difference is Frontline Baddies are used to it. Many of us have lived in the flames for so long that we start to become an entirely new fire, much to what you had just said. You can only burn something so much until it becomes a part of the flames. We are resilient, we're caring, we can heal the burns given to us, tend to our own flames to not burn others, and the expectation cannot be that we continue to live this way. We deserve better and our communities deserve better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Tracey. So we're now going to have Dean Dewar from Center 454 at Belong Ottawa speak. So Dean has dedicated himself to supporting people who are experiencing homelessness and living with concurrent disorders for over 8 years. He has successfully established over 100 bachelor apartments through 3 supportive housing residences in Ottawa. He's very good at this. During the pandemic, he prioritized staff well-being while managing a local soup kitchen and launching a new residence amidst a lockdown, demonstrating strong, transparent leadership. Dean understands the importance of committed staff members in any successful social service organization. He joined Belong Ottawa in March because of its reputation for fostering community and providing exceptional support to its members in the downtown area. So welcome, Dean.
Start the countdown to the rocket
exactly.
ship.
Let's go.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go.
Thank you so much.
Not a
I
problem.
love that.
I always wanted to count down.
This is fantastic. And don't worry, we'll have a lot of time for questions after as well, because I honestly just want to hear a lot more from these two other speakers. But hello, my name's Dean. Today I'm going to be talking to you about what Belong Ottawa does for supporting staff wellness. I love this little clicker. So a little bit about me that Kim has already talked about is that the last 8 years, I've really worked with people coming in or who's experiencing homelessness or coming out of homelessness, working with concurrent disorders. Within that time, I've opened 3 supportive housing residences with inner city health, and they've just been so important for that development. I worked at Shepherd's right at the start of the pandemic, and that was fantastic, and recently moved to Belong Ottawa. I'm also on cue cards. So in February of this year, we did a rebrand at Belong Ottawa to incorporate all of our different centers. We want to ensure everyone knows that this is a place where they can belong here, and it's not a faith-based service. We are funded by the Anglican Church, but it is for everyone who is able to access our service. So that incorporates our Center 454, the Well and St. Luke's table. Our mission here is to provide a safe space that connects people and creates community. We offer programs that address basic human needs, foster dignity, wellness, and hope for all. Some of our programs are laundry services, toiletries, shower access, phone, computer, and Wi-Fi access, as well as cell phone charging. Our vision is an inclusive community where no one is marginalized and everyone is valued and supported. Here's an overview of our strategic priorities for the next 2 years. While all are vital in creating a healthy environment for our staff team, I want to spend a little bit more time speaking on the ones that are highlighted in purple in regards to our staff wellness. Our first and foremost is our staff resiliency and effectiveness. With this, I very much appreciate you talking about staff being paid fairly. As much as I will always advocate for staff being paid more, at Belong Ottawa, we start off, one of our first initiatives is recruiting skilled and diverse staff. We want to ensure we have the best people to support our participants. And we do this by offering a competitive salary that is over the minimum, the living wage in Ottawa, for opportunities for development with a comprehensive benefits package and a pretty good pension plan. Now with this, I will still always advocate for additional funding. Our staff do incredible work and still are paid the social service salary. We know staff have lives outside of our organization, and we try our best to support them in all aspects of life domains. We try to be flexible with hours as much as possible, and we try to bring people's passions into our programming through our programmed activities. This could be like fishing, people who are really into the gym, they can bring that in, or sewing, things like that. Not only does this support our current staff, but also will attract additional talent. So when it comes time to hire, we hopefully have a great market within our labor market. Our second initiative is clarifying roles and responsibilities with staff. This is something that we are currently working on, as the roles and responsibilities have changed over the years. And in doing so, staff can work more efficiently together and creates less conflict. This also helps with the hiring process, so staff know what they're expected to do when they start. And it's not that shock that we've seen. This hopefully also will prevent our turnover. This also includes having our managers and administrative staff have clear roles and responsibilities outlined so staff know who to go to for different items. Thirdly, in promoting staff development and growth, at Belong Ottawa, we start off with ensuring all of our staff are trained in essential trainings like MVCI, ASSIST, and CPR first aid. With this, we also, let's keep going. In addition to these trainings, we also encourage staff to look at additional trainings that they're interested in, and if it aligns with Belong Ottawa's vision or mission, we will try our best to assist them in attaining that training, something like trauma-informed care or motivational interviewing. Often we refer our staff to utilize the community capacity building within Ottawa that provides frontline workers in Ottawa who work with people experiencing homeless training at no cost to the staff themselves. Included within staff growth and development, we also want to formalize a process for regular supervision, coaching, and training between managers and staff. Often, especially during COVID, this is one of the first things that was pushed aside while we were trying to run on our hamster wheels, addressing all of the needs in our programs. I strongly suggest that we reinitiate these meetings as they are fundamental for not only our staff development, but also program development. This is also a great time to delegate tasks for staff matching their goals. For example, I've had in the past, I've had a staff who really wanted to do go into probation and parole. So I had them be the liaison between our organization and the probation and parole team. Lastly, and most importantly, is prioritizing the well-being of our staff. We understand that our staff have a high stress position that can be very traumatic in nature. Not only do we ensure that our staff are trained to handle circumstances they may face at work, but we also encourage staff to use our comprehensive benefits package. Additionally, we provide stress management sessions for staff and their families through our Ottawa Pastoral Care. We ensure that we debrief after each incident, and a resource that we like to use for our debriefing is the coping model through NVCI, as well as Amanda Rochello's low impact debriefing that can be found free on her website. Additionally, we have leaders within Belong who encourage staff and managers to participate in Soul Space, which is a fantastic opportunity for everyone working within our services. We're also hosting an entire Belong Ottawa Staff Wellness Day on June 16th, where we'll be closing our programs to help our staff refresh, rejuvenate the day full of professional development and team building. The next strategic direction is our volunteer engagement. Although it doesn't pertain to our staff wellness, we included this because due to our limited resources, we would not be able to fulfill our mission if it was not for our volunteers. As for the case with most of our organizations, we lost the momentum of our volunteer involvement throughout the pandemic. Our immediate focus is placed to re-energize our volunteer base, as they are fundamental in supporting all of our staff areas in our operations, from reception, kitchen support, laundry services, social programming, and landscaping. This will support our staff in taking some of the workload off, providing our staff more time for the items in the program that fill their cup. We're also investing in our community volunteers, working with people who participate in our program, as this will build community, empower people, and once again, support our staff. With this, we want to ensure our volunteers come in with clear roles and responsibilities, sufficient onboarding, and they're ready to hit our program running. The last strategic direction I'd like to talk about is our neighborhood engagement. Not only do we want staff to be proud of where they work, but we want to also know, that our neighbors are some of our greatest opportunities. Unfortunately, we have also seen that our staff and program can feel overwhelmed and at a loss when we feel like there's nothing more we can do to help someone who's presenting unwell and in need of additional support. Thankfully, we have some really great neighbors in our community. People like Sandy Hill Community Health Center's Oasis program, which is providing the center with wound care once a week starting today. We're also letting Center 454 participate in cleanups and other initiatives, providing our participants with a pretty good wage. They are also shifting their drop-in hours, providing a safe space for people using our services so that when we close down, they'll open up, providing someone who's accessing the shelters a safe place to be throughout the entire day till they're allowed back at our shelters. Not only does this help our participants, but also helps our neighborhood. We partner with many organizations like the Royal and the City of Ottawa's outreach team, and many organizations in this room today to help fill the gaps in services and help participants navigate our system. Another really great opportunity we have in terms of our community partners is a community memorial space that CMHA and Ottawa Inner City leads, provides not only our participants with a space to grieve, but also our staff as well. Our last memorial kind of spanned over 3 months, and we had 27 people to celebrate. That number is sadly growing, but it's a really great opportunity for us to sit with our clients and mourn those individuals. We know that no organization can do it alone, and it is vital for us to build a strong network of community partners. I'm sure we're tired of talking about COVID, and I know that we all know that the last few years have been extremely difficult. With the housing emergency declared in Ottawa, the opioid crisis, increased isolation and increased food insecurity, lack of public funding, and the toxic drug supply has brought forward an aggression that we've not seen before. In supporting our staff, we have also had to increase safety protocols and continue to build on these, including overdose response, training, radios and programs, and staff safe spaces. With this being said, we've gone through COVID, and next year we'll be celebrating 70 years at Center 454. We do this by working together. Our staff are extremely supportive of each other, and staff wellness is championed and embraced throughout the entire organization and supported by our management board's HR subcommittee. This includes keeping each other accountable for work-life balances, debriefing and checking in with each other, not only right after an incident, the day after, or whenever we feel like it might be coming back up. We try to keep communication open in two ways. We host weekly staff meetings, which are complemented by end-of-week summary emails. And most importantly, staff safety and wellness is at the forefront of developing strategies and making program decisions. With that, thank you so much. I think we'll go to questions.
Okay, so yeah, we've got some time for questions.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I'm so honing in on Tracey right now because you spoke to me very deeply. And my question's around Frontline Baddies, you and your experience with like holding activism in the workplace, because I feel like that's part of our role too sometimes. And I often don't have the liberty to just take a day off and go and do the things that I love to do in the community. But I'm just wondering if you guys have ever experienced trying to organize things within your group, or you as yourself done anything to kind of promote your own activism in the community.
Yeah,
Thanks.
That's a great question. And we have, so Eileen and I's background very much so is working in the downtown east side of Vancouver. It's like how we met and how we became like really close friends, and working with youth with addiction specifically. So what had happened last year around this time in Vancouver is that the only youth detox site was being defunded and shut down by Vancouver Cool Health, which I'm still technically a health worker at. And we formed a grassroots campaign against them doing this, because essentially, like when you break it down, what they had presented for detox for youth was at-home detox. And when we're talking about fentanyl and benzos, and specifically like benzos, you can dive while you're detoxing, and that's not appropriate. One of my kids last year actually died because there was no youth detox, and what the substance he was detoxing from was a mixture of heroin and benzos, and he thought he handled it because historically he's been able to get through it. So we collaborated with other partners in the community to talk about this and to try to get it reversed, and it was not reversed. And we saw deaths in our community because of it. So yes, to answer that question, Frontline Baddies does do advocating. We also have very recently, with the street sweeps in Vancouver's downtown east side as well, have been doing advocating around trying to actually move funds to the individuals who are being like having their tents seized. So we have donation stickers on our website that when people buy them, all of the profit from them goes directly to workers on the streets who are buying tents and handing them out to people, because VPD came through and threw away their tents and all of their things. So yes, we do that through Frontline Baddies as well. With that though, like we can't take on everything. So if there's an idea that someone has in a different city, we help support them. And it's that collaboration piece and that community-based piece that we really try to always extend.
This is a question for Tracey. So first, thank you for working with youth with concurrent disorders. They're a challenging cohort to work with. I work in a clinic that provides care to similar kids. What I'm wondering is all the kids that you've helped. I know you talked a lot about the overdoses, and that's something that's just so aberrant for some of the kids who are so young. What about the kids that you help and you see who have kind of moved along? What is that cohort like for you in terms of being able to engage or attach to them? Because that seems to be one of the things you mentioned, is that these kids have kind of a BS radar if you're genuine or not.
100%. So I think for any of us who connect with clients, and I don't think this is just for frontline workers, like that connection stays there. And we might come across them in our life or in our journey outside of the roles that we knew them to be. The youth that we work with are street entrenched, which means when we're walking down the street, they see us and they know that that care and that love is there. They know it hasn't magically gone away just because we're not in that same position or not in that same job. I literally had a kid who CFS closed his bed 3 weeks ago, and I was at the hospital last week, and he yelled across, and he has a warrant out for his arrest, and he's yelling across the parking lot, Tracey, Tracey. I think I've spent all of 3 hours with that youth, but he knew who I was because of the care and the love that I showed him and advocating for him. And like, that's what they need. And that's like, ultimately, like, they just want to feel loved. Like when we're talking about kids and specifically youth who have been in the system and the trauma that they've encountered, it is much, much different than, I want to say, almost anyone else, because they don't have pro-social, like even physical touch. Like we're not allowed to hug them, like, but we're allowed to restrain them, right? Like that's insane. So like we're literally teaching them from a very young age that it's okay to put hands on someone to restrain them when you don't agree with them. And then when they turn into a teenager and they try to do the same with their partner, we're saying, no, that's not appropriate. You're going to jail now. Like we are sending our own confusing signals to these kids, and it's not okay. And we are actually criminalizing them in how we care for them.
Do you have any partnerships with any local community health agencies or like Foothills or anything like that to provide like additional care for these kids, or are you kind of managing it all in-house?
It tends to all be in-house, because the reality of the situation is the kids that I get specifically at my program within Viros are the kids that no one else wants to touch because they are like walking death. And like, I've had that told to me. So it's one of those things. Like I had a kid last week who's telling me he's suicidal. We have it down in a disclosure. We had the youth outcomes questionnaire. That's a psychological based tool that shows that his mental health has declined in the last month. We bring those things into us with the hospitals. We're trying to talk to the hospital staff. I have him threatening that he's going to go out and stab someone. They have police officers on it, and yet we're told he's not formable. And I walk out with him coming into my truck. So my kids don't get the care they deserve because of how they look and how they've been treated, which means I'm an advocate day in and day out for them. That's just the reality of it. And that's the reality of youth work for our kids who live on the streets.
I'm just wondering if any of you have had experience or could comment on supervision. And I don't mean managerial supervision. I'm talking much more about the psychotherapeutic supervision in terms of managing staff wellness and the strong feelings that working in this area does provokes in people.
So I do in my team, and I'm trying to make sure that throughout Enviros, like throughout our nonprofit, it's done at every site, because I'm not the only site, but I do debriefs after every critical with every team member who is a part of that debrief. I talk to them and we create safety plans for my staff, because my staff all tend to also have lived experience and are considered what's called competency hires. So when a kid overdoses, for my staff, that's gonna look really different for a staff member who's been sober for 15 years versus a staff member who's 3 years into their sobriety. So it's creating safety plans with my staff as well to make sure that, like, if this happens, how do we respond to make sure you're safe? With some staff, it looks like they leave for the rest of the day. They're not working. They are getting paid for it, but they're not working and they're no longer on site so that they can heal. In terms of how they get more support, like we do have an elder at our nonprofit as well that they could check in with if they wanted to. And there are some other ways for them to get support, like through our employment assistance program. But with us, it looks like debriefs and talking about it, and then the safety plans and the preventative plans for our staff. Also, professional development plans I have found to be very helpful, much to what you were saying of like finding what they're interested in and helping support them grow in that area helps build resiliency for them, is what I have found to be true.
100%. Thank you for sharing that. We're very similar. That, and then also trying to be preventative in terms of that too. So if we feel like something's going to come up, kind of giving them some heads up that, hey, this person's really not been doing well. There might be a couple overdoses, or drug supply today in Ottawa is not very good. I need people to be doing a little bit extra ground checks, bring radios with you, things like that.
I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, I think it's one of those measures of quality of a particular service is whether you have supervision. And I don't mean just in response to bad things happening, but just something you build into the job regularly, and people regularly attend for supervision. It's made to be a priority. And the way I always pitch it is it's around talking about the people who are taking up space in your head. And we had to ramp it up a bit during COVID. We were doing it by Zoom. But I think it's one of those quality measures of services which really needs to be emphasized and to work out how to do it well.
So for my understanding as well, Canada-wide, if you work at a youth resource, we have accreditation standards, and those standards are pretty strict, and that includes supervisions. And part of those standards to be accredited in an accredited service, and you have to be accredited if you are with CFS or like Children Family Services or MCFD, is that you have supervisions with your staff at least once every 9 weeks. The thing about this though is a lot of frontline staff are never told that they're supposed to be getting a supervision once every 9 weeks. And I can tell you that in my first 2 years working with youth, I never received a supervision once.
And do you mind me asking with that, like who's doing the supervision? Is it a like professional or is it a manager?
It's a supervisor. So like at my facility, it's myself, it's a supervisor. And then our managers review our supervisions because our managers are managing teams of essentially like 70 or 80 people at that point. So like my team is 20 to 30 people. So it's to try to also like spread out workload.
Yeah. So I could only imagine how much additional trauma you get from that as a manager too. I know when I was a case manager, we had clinical supervision, and that was done by someone who's, I don't know what her background is, but she was someone who had that experience and her only job was to do clinical supervision. I definitely think that's something that's lacking, at least in the city of Ottawa. I've worked for many organizations, and I haven't seen a clinical supervision in terms of a preventative measure in terms of that. But great question.
I can just say for Sandy Hill Community Health Center that we do actually provide clinical supervision for our harm reduction workers. All of our case managers clinically supervised, and now the supervisors have clinical supervision.
Wow, it's fantastic.
I had a question about the pay inequity. And I mean, it seems like the decisions about how much somebody is paid happen organization by organization, but this is a systemic issue all across Canada, and I'm sure many other places as well. And I was just wondering if there's any organizing that's happening across Canada in terms of peer work, lived experience work, unionizing, like a movement to fight for increased wages, which seems obviously unfair to put that burden on people who are already, having to do the work. So I'm just curious if there is any organizing around that. I mean, it just seems so inequitable that it has to be up to an organization to do a good thing. Like that's not what it's about. So.
Yeah, 100%. I think we've had a lot of questions come through our Instagram from frontline staff wanting to know like the unionization process and what that looks like. So those movements are happening all over the nation at different sites. The issue that we encounter though is like we're already doing too much, and like that is the reality. And like at the end of the day, I think a lot of us, especially us with lived experience, are just really happy to be doing the work because we didn't have people like us for us. And so we know what we're giving. And like, to a certain extent, that's not something that money can ever, I guess, like really compensate. If this is making sense to other people, like it's a soul healing thing, especially for those of us who have been addicted or like have been in active addiction. Like it's you're giving back when you've done some like really horrific things in your life. And so in terms of like the spectrum of what are you going to fight for and advocate for, our own wage does not seem to be at the top of the list when we have our kids dying, right? Like that's like our efforts are going to be put into like, how are we going to advocate for our detox resource not to be shut down for our kids? Or how are we going to advocate for the street sweeps in the downtown east side to stop? Like, and then also recognizing and understanding that like we're professionals that are working on the streets with these police officers sometimes, and they know who we are as well. And like it puts us in dangerous situations, not only with our places of employment, but like with our community stakeholders and how we need to advocate to make sure that our clients are getting the best care that they can get without putting us into like really precarious situations. So yeah, outside of unionization, and then even that, there's a lot of pros and cons with that. So I mean, we help wherever we can, but that's our reality. And I do think it needs to be done, to your point. I just don't know how any of us are going to go about doing that when they don't, like, specifically within youth care, when you're looking at how much we get paid for our contracts. And like, if you have a budget of $300 a week for food for 6 kids, like it's, you get what I'm saying? Like we need more money all the way around, not just for our salaries. And I think we're very, very sensitive to that. And we don't want our program shut down because we're asking for too much money. So it's a really fun game of like, how much can I ask for that will actually get approved due to all this inflation without asking for too much that they just say, we won't fund you anymore.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Hello. Sorry, first time speaking this morning. Thank you so much for all three of you have shared this morning. I really appreciated hearing the stories and wisdom and all the important hard work that you do. I'm quite curious. I'm quite passionate about anti-capitalism and anti-colonialism and the care that's created through collective sustainability. And as someone who's trained as a social worker and counselor and future clinical psychologist, I find the side disciplines like psychology and social work are quite individualist frames, how we view our care and the care of our communities and wellness. And I'm curious if you have a sense about what kind of education or training might be useful for folks who are involved in education systems, which are quite colonial, and how we can maybe destabilize or decenter individual ideas of care to build more collectively sustainable support networks. Please let me know if I can clarify, but I would really appreciate hearing about your wisdom.
So I'm not sure. So what you're saying is, how do we teach people to be more helpful later in the schools? Is that what could we do more in the schools? Is that the question?
Yeah, how can we foster educational environments for healthcare workers or social workers that promote collective care when they get to the work, instead of engaging in self-care as this individual thing that we do by ourselves in private and pay $180 for?
I think sharing our stories, right? So eliminating the stigma. And we do that by what we're doing here, is having these conversations and sharing people's stories. I think that's one of the best things we can do, and change that narrative, that, you know, that colonial narrative that you speak of back then, to what it should be. And what it should be is about us all healing together, right? So I think just changing that narrative and the awareness that comes now Yeah, I feel that there's a shift happening. It's very slow in the education system, as you know, but I do see things starting to shift and change. An elder once told me it's going to take 7 generations, and to keep that in mind in the work that we do. And so I always keep that in my mind. You know, every little bit helps, and you know, keep sharing people's stories and promoting people to share their own stories. That's it. Yeah.
So we have a saying in Frontline, community care is self-care. And like, I can't like preach that enough. We're a community. Like this entire idea that like we're supposed to do it alone is like a very colonized idea, much to your point. And when we come together as community, not only are we stronger, but we find connection and love within each other. And I know that sounds like really kumbaya, but the reality of the situation is like almost by what people are wearing, I can tell if they're a frontline worker or not in this room, which says quite a bit, right? So it's that community. It's seeing yourself in others and being like, I know you. I think I want to say the first night someone said, you guys look like us. And we're like, yeah, because we are. Hey, there we go, right? And that's been the running joke that we've had all the last few days here. But like it is a reality. And I think in terms of like what you're talking about, Frontline Baddies is already looking into talking and presenting at institutes like this one to explain like the reality of frontline work and what it does look like. Because I think a lot of people are coming into it with like care, like they want to help, but they don't come from this life and they don't understand it. And they do a lot of harm. And their harm equates to other people being harmed. And when we're talking about harm reduction and trauma-informed care, their lack of knowledge, their ignorance actually hurts our community. I see you, Star. Yeah, it hurts our community. It hurts us in ways that we can't sometimes verbalize or vocalize, which is why I know what I said hit for a lot of frontline workers, because some of these things we can't even process, right? It's just occurring. So I know we're trying to do that with currently it's like the Douglas Social Justice, Douglas College with their social justice crew, and talking to them about like, this is the reality. If you go on the street, this is what it's going to look like. If you're an outreach worker, here are some ways to help so that you're not burning out in your first 6 months of your job. Like here are maybe some places you don't want to work at. Here are other places that we know you'll have a good experience and you'll be cared for. So that is starting, but it's going to take time, right? And our community, mainly everyone in our community. And like, I really say that frontline workers with lived experience, y'all should call those people out. You should make them feel uncomfortable when they make you feel uncomfortable, because the reality of the situation is the shit that they're saying to you behind those closed doors where clients and staff aren't present, they might be saying in front of your clients and staff, and you just might not be knowing. So like, I know that's a more emotional labor placed on us, but like, I highly recommend doing it because it will either get them out of that team environment and get them out of a spot they shouldn't be in, or it will call them into better behavior and they'll pick it up and do it.
I think we'll break. There's refreshments here, and everybody to come back for 10:45, please.